Hi everyone, this is part 2 of still life drawing. I realised from the first presentation that I did that I mentioned negative space, but I didn't necessarily explain it very well. So when we're looking at negative space, we're actually looking at creating shapes from the spaces around them. So for example, if I had my hand like that, I wouldn't draw my hand, I'd draw the hole. So I draw the spaces in between and around. And often that sort of creates a jigsaw puzzle where you can figure out if the object that so you haven't actually drawn the object, you've drawn the spaces in between it. And if you get them right, then the object magically appears. So I'm just going to do a demonstration of how that works. So I've taken a photo of the composition that I had the other day, because obviously flowers don't last forever and we can't get them from the supermarket anymore either. So lucky I took the photo. Anyway, so I'm going to be working from that photo now, which I've got up on my laptop. Okay, so you can see, as I've previously done, I've done a very quick sketch to kind of decide where things are on the page. So this time, instead of drawing the shapes, I'm going to draw the holes. Okay, so a really obvious hole to start with is the one in the handle there. Okay, so if I was to sort of copy that, I would just go. Okay, you can see this is a lot slower way of drawing. So often we're kind of imagining that we're actually tracing these shapes, and we're sort of going millimetre by millimetre really. So we may well speed this one up because it's going to be a lot slower than the last one. Okay, so the other thing about getting negative space right is that you don't actually have any shapes, any sort of lines overlapping each other. It's pure outline. So not necessarily worrying too much about proportion here. Okay, so just chasing around the outline of things. Okay, so I'm just not differentiating where the lines and the shapes are. I'm just doing this as one single outline. So instead of, it's helpful, instead of just drawing the spout and finishing that, I'm actually kind of just looking at the shape. So where these sort of stalks of the leaves come out, and then it's a matter of deciding where we go with that. So there's another shape here, so that So I've kind of broken that there, so it's sort of deciding where I'm actually going to go with that. So I'm sort of starting again. So just sort of tracing around the outside of the shapes. So there's no overlapping, there's no crossover happening at all. I'm not necessarily worrying hugely about proportion. Okay, so I can also see there's a little hole in here, so I'm going to draw that. So you can sort of see I've gone off the page there, and it really doesn't matter. Sometimes you sort of want to stare at something for a while because, like if you look at something, because often when we're looking at the positive shapes, we're not seeing the negative space and vice versa. So sometimes I kind of like just spend maybe 20 seconds, just focus on the black shape and get that back again and sort of see, is what I've drawn similar to what I can actually see there. So I just notice that there's actually a little bit more bit there. So I'm just kind of doing a shape there just to help myself. Okay, so I've actually got a closed in shape there, and so I can sort of see, oh, your mind's a bit it's not quite the same. Like I can see it's a bit sort of wider and through there. And so this is all sort of something that practice does kind of help you figure out. So you're looking at the shapes and you're thinking, well, is that the same as what I can see there? So it is often deciding how many layers to go through. And then sort of deciding, where do I actually come back to now? So you can sort of see that I have got bits of overlapping because I haven't, sort of making decisions as to what's behind what, or, I mean, ideally there'd be none of that. Like you can sort of see here, there's sort of overlapping where a new shape's starting. So, well, that shouldn't really be happening at all. So what I can kind of do, just as an indication of what are the shapes and what's the negative space, I can just kind of quickly just shade in the negative space. So the negative space are the holes and the gaps and the spaces behind. So I'm reasonably happy with the shape of the coffee pot. I mean, that's another sort of useful thing to do when you're sort of in that drawing frame of mind. It's quite good to not actually label things, to not sort of, because that's when our left brain sort of takes over, and it's like thinking, well, I know what things look like, I don't have to look at them. So the more we just kind of look at things as random abstract shapes, the more we actually do take notice and look at them properly. Okay, so I've just moved out of negative space mode here now, and I'm just kind of building that lid in there. And I say it is helpful to not label things, I'm just kind of doing that. So often when you're drawing, you sort of do move between. Like I find that quite often. I sort of go in and out of negative space, really. So it is a useful sort of check as to whether you've actually got things correct. I find it's So I say I don't use it all the time, and I mean it's a useful exercise, I think, just for getting into that way of thinking. And obviously some arrangements are easier to sort of figure out the negative space than others, and I mean the other thing is it is a nice thing to do to actually, you will find, I'm sure anyone that's done any amount of drawing before will know that it's much easier to draw from a picture because it's already been confined, it's already been, like this is how it fits onto the page. So a lot of that composition work has been sort of done for you. So you can see in this drawing I've actually, on the flowers, I have started to draw on them as well. So it's not a pure negative space, although that is where I started from. The other thing that occurs to me is that this kind of drawing would translate really nicely into an etching, because I've used the pen which would work quite nicely as a dry point. But we're not dealing with that today. And I mean, obviously the more drawings I do, like sketches of my subject matter, the more I get to know it and the better I get. Like I'm happier with this drawing than the previous one that I did on the last exercise. And as I say, I do tend to find that they get better as I go by. Sometimes you find your first drawing is your best one, and that's how it is.